Welcome to Spot Check, the video update series for The Greatest Unreality, a dissertation about Dungeons & Dragons. I'm Nick Miser. Well, I am officially done with field work. I had really wanted to go to North Texas RPG Con one more time as part of my field work, but going over my budget and knowing what I have left to send out in terms of rewards once the dissertation is complete, I've realized that that's just really not going to be able to happen, which is fine because I have tons of data that I'm going through. I've been working and plowing through transcripts. I realized I have over 1,000 pages of transcripts at this point, and I'm not even done transcribing. That might seem like too much, but it's actually been really useful going through the entire process of transcribing each of these interviews. Some of them happened a while ago, and I don't remember every little detail that happened. And by creating these transcripts, I have a good record that I can go back over as I'm thinking through various ideas and make sure that I'm including as many perspectives as possible in there. And also, because they're going to be hosted publicly, I'm excited that other people might be able to get a chance to look at some of the thoughts that my interlocutors have had and maybe draw some different conclusions than I did. So I'm really excited about that. What I want to talk about today, though, is some thoughts that I've been having about rules.
You can't just say he's gone. You owe us an ending.
I owe you nothing. I am a dungeon master. I create a boundless world and I bind it by rules.
That clip, of course, is from the episode of Community that recently came out called Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And I think that there's a lot of really interesting thoughts that Dan Harmon and the creators of Community have about D&D in that episode. But that line, I create a boundless world and bind it with rules, has been echoing in my head in particular ever since I saw that episode. And so when I was doing some transcription of an interview with Derek White, also known as GeekPreacher, and I'll link his information in the notes, he was talking a lot about rules also, so I was kind of combining these two thoughts. And one of the things that Derek wanted to emphasize was that for him, rules are not intended to limit the players and their interaction with the world, but he specifically says over and over again that for him, the rules are something that are intended to spark his imagination and the imagination of the other players. So there's this tension between rules as a limiting, defining sort of thing and rules as something that can spur you on and potentially be actually a creative force. And that's one of the tensions that I see going through the game. So this idea of a boundless world that the Dungeon Master binds by rules is in some ways paradoxical, but besides the connection with what Derek said and how the idea of rules sparking imagination, another thing that this has brought to mind that I'm still thinking through, but it's a connection I want to share with you, is looking back quite a long time ago to another world builder that we don't usually think about very much in relationship to role-playing games, and that's the English poet William Blake. Now, I'm by no means a Blake scholar, but I do know that Blake created his own mythology that developed over time through his poems and illustrations and contained a variety of different figures. And one of these figures is Urizen, who is the embodiment of conventional reason and law. He's usually depicted as you see him here as a bearded old man, and I want to point out his architect's tools there because those are tools with which he both measures and creates the universe, and through measuring he also constrains the universe. And so there's this connection with how dungeon masters, as Abed describes them, both create boundless worlds and bind those boundless worlds through rules. So Urizen is about some of the same things that being a dungeon master is about. And I think this parallel between Urizen and the dungeon master becomes even more powerful when you think about it in terms of Blake's broader mythology. Now, in his original formulation of Urizen, Urizen was part of a two-part figure with Los, the figure who represented unbounded imagination, as the other half of it. So whether we look at William Blake, the work of Dan Harmon in Community, or the work of the Dungeon Master in general, and how the way that some of my interlocutors have talked about it, we see this connection between unbounded imagination and reason, between measuring something and using those measurements to spur on your unbounded imagination of it. And I think that that tension is kind of at the center of what role-playing games do, especially especially those that tend towards quantification, like Dungeons & Dragons, by taking a broader problem that William Blake identified a long time ago in modernity, this tension between rules and imagination, and turning it into a game that's productive. Dungeons & Dragons allows us to experience and work through some of the tensions that we find more broadly in our society. So I think that there may be some resources in looking further at William Blake for understanding what's happening in role-playing games, what's happening in our society, and vice versa, that maybe looking at some of these things in role-playing games might provide some insight into William Blake. I'm not a Blake scholar, like I said, but I'm going to be digging into this more and sharing any further insights that might come up as I go. In the meantime, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, especially on the community episode, this idea of boundless worlds bound by rules, and how you see the Dungeon Master's role relating to that, if that jives with your understanding, or just anything from that episode. I'm looking at doing a chapter in my dissertation about representations of gaming in media, and I think that those community episodes will be a centerpiece, so it's something I'll likely be coming back to more, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.